So this is exciting because this is my second meeting with the Innovation Lab talking about what we did last summer. I know last summer was a little weird for me because I think I had work and had to like dip out immediately after I presented, but no work today, so that's good. Um, so this special topics initially started kind of the beginning of last summer with myself and Kayo Tsuchihashi, who's not here because she's working. But our previous project was completed over the course of last summer and early fall. And the synopsis of the project was basically we were investigating the relationship between medication adherence and in-home behaviors via patient interviews. So this was kind of to look at how patients take their medications at home and how this affects their adherence, but also looking at potential technologies or different things like that that could help with patients' adherence. So we didn't have physical technologies to show them, but we asked them different questions about potential technologies that might help. And throughout last fall, we submitted an abstract and our poster to APHA and got to present at the virtual APHA conference in 2021, which is shown on the right, which was really exciting. So to kind of continue in that realm of research, we wanted to get the pharmacist perspective on medication adherence, specifically with their interventions with patients and how the dispensing system and other technologies affects this. Because we heard the patient point of view, we wanted to get the pharmacist point of view. So the project goals were to understand community pharmacists' perceptions of medication adherence and the issue of non-adherence, to learn how community pharmacists make adherence interventions and how this can be improved upon, identify the resources and information that could be utilized by community pharmacists to improve adherence, and lastly, to learn about how the dispensing system and other technologies impact adherence and in the pharmacy and inquire upon how those can be improved. Next slide, please. So this slide kind of summarizes our methods for this project. So the first step was obviously first we came up with the kind of idea for this project and kind of an outline, but then once we had that, we recruited participants, and these were both pharmacists and community pharmacy practice residents within the local area. So we did this by using a convenience sample in which we reached out to people we kind of already know and had a contact with to kind of work out our survey and interview and see how well it worked, and then saw if we need to make any changes to it. So we utilized the community pharmacy practice residents that were working with Pitt. So that was with Giant Eagle, Rite Aid, and Asti's South Hills Pharmacy. Many of the students know these residents through our courses, which we took. And we also interviewed their preceptors to kind of get both the resident and the pharmacist point of view. So how those worked is we kind of had an hour-long time, and the first portion we introduced it and then gave them the survey to fill out, and then afterwards we did our interview. So the survey was done via Qualtrics, and this was delivered to gather information about the pharmacist's current medication adherence intervention methods within their respective practices, also to get some demographic information. And you can see an example of a question on the bottom left. And then after the survey, we went into the interview, which were virtual, semi-structured interviews with questions about adherence interventions, dispensing system, and potential ways technology can improve these interventions. You can kind of see a summary of the questions we asked on the bottom right. And via the interview, we were kind of able to dive deeper in both how the pharmacists make adherence interventions, but also seeing what resources or kind of barriers they face to these interventions and seeing how technology can play a role in improving these. And then after we did that, we transcribed the interviews, and we will begin to identify codes and themes, which will lead to the results from our research. Next slide, please. And this slide, I know we wanted to stay to 2 slides, but I could not fit everything onto 2 slides, so we had to go to 3. This is kind of just a synopsis of everything accomplished this past summer. So like I mentioned before, we did the interviews and transcriptions for the pharmacists and residents. In addition to that, we reviewed the existing literature, some of the existing literature about community pharmacy practices, and both looked to see kind of what they have researched about adherence interventions, but also looked at the methods that they utilize, if they use focus groups, if they use semi-structured interviews, different things like that. And kind of to supplement that, we kind of did mini journal club type activities throughout the summer, in which we had an article and we read and reviewed the methods and purpose and results of the article and compared it to our current work and kind of outlined those. So kind of a mini example of that shown on the right of the screen, you can see. And that's pretty much everything. Our contact information is below. And I think didn't say I was going to be a P3 at the beginning, but I'm going to be a P3 this coming year. That's everything. Are you publishing in a journal? We shall see. That's the end goal. So, and we were kind of looking at APHA or some of the other sort of technology relating journals that Dr. Patel is the expert on. So,
far from expert, I'll certainly say you were teaching me throughout. Matt, question.
Hello. I just had a quick question. First off, thank you, Maggie, for your presentation. I really like the graphics that were included. So like in terms of the next step, based on the results that you found, is the next step to like broaden the scale of this research, or is it to like develop, like, are you in the phase of like beginning to develop like this new technology to help address medication adherence?
So I think right now we use the convenience sample. So we got to interview a total of 3 residents and 3 pharmacists. And we kind of used that initially to kind of obviously get some results from a survey, but also to kind of refine and make the interview better, because we want to see, well, what questions work? Like, what do we have enough time for? For example, we kind of found that if we want to keep the whole thing to an hour, we seem to spend a lot more time on sort of like their background information and demographics in the beginning. We want to have more time for more of the like juicier stuff, like the technologies and different things like that. So kind of restructuring how we deliver the interview so that we have more time for that. So next steps would kind of be because we got kind of what we wanted with the convenience sample done. So we want to make any changes needed and then try to spread this out to more pharmacists and or residents. And once we kind of do that, then we would hopefully find the results. I don't think we'll initially be working on the technology. I don't know if we have that expertise yet, but we have some connections with the School of Computing and Information Science, I believe is the title, who can help us with that.
All right, thank you.
So I apologize. I missed the most important part, which was the intervention. Like, what's the intervention that causes adherence?
So those are kind of what we find out via what the different pharmacists do, because for some pharmacists, for example, they in their dispensing system, it might prompt them to make a certain intervention with the patient. So it might prompt them and say, like, lisinopril has not been filled in over like 2 or so weeks and they should be due for the medication. And it might ask the pharmacist to make the call. Certain dispensing systems show the prescription days covered score on the screen, and they might look at that and see. Or if a pharmacist is just filling things and might notice something off about their like refills or something like that, that could prompt them to make an intervention. And then what the intervention would be could obviously vary from pharmacist to pharmacist. That might be calling them, and that might be putting a required counsel on their next med pickup to have an in-person discussion with them. That could be a variety of things, but that's kind of what we were looking at. And then seeing if like technology in the dispensing system or technology elsewhere could kind of better prompt those interventions and find like where interventions are most appropriate and then how those can be done.
I appreciate that. So just as an FYI, I have tested probably hundreds of apps on the adherence side of things, and I have regular ones that are on my phone just to remind me of how poorly designed they are. So my highest recommendation is download them now. And just if you have a medication, put it on there. If you don't, put like a multivitamin or something to test it out. So like a great example is MediSafe. I believe it's the #1 for med adherence. I could be wrong. It has a sound that's supposed to be pills inside of a glass vial shaking. That sounds like a rattlesnake that goes off every morning. So if I don't wake up with my regular alarm, that will surely remind me to take my medications. The way they work, just so you know, is they collect the data from patients being adherent or not, sell that data to life sciences companies, and that's how they're free to patients. And so there's a lot of intriguing business models, but I'm fundamentally a believer that the true adherence on the app side of things, like the patient engagement side, has not been solved or is even remotely close to being solved. Reminding me with a rattlesnake every morning or every time I need to take a med is not the most effective way to get this done.
Right. And that's something a little different, but we've kind of noticed in interviews is that a lot of times the pharmacists say, well, the best way to really get to the bottom of the adherence issue is talking with the patient and asking them questions. And obviously there are certain things that technology cannot replace. And that's something that's obviously important that we still have to acknowledge, but obviously we want to strive to do what technology can do. So